The icy wind howled through Deadwood Station as Nora Adams clutched her valise with trembling fingers, watching the last passengers disembark from the train that had carried her across half the country. Theodore Blackburn, her fiancé of 2 years, was nowhere to be seen, despite his promise to meet her on this very platform on this precise April afternoon in 1876. As the station clock struck 4, the cold reality settled in her stomach like a stone. Her groom wasn't coming. "Last call for departing passengers," the conductor shouted, his voice barely audible above the train's impatient whistle. Nora stood frozen, her wedding dress carefully packed in her trunk, tears threatening to spill onto her cheeks as snowflakes dusted her shoulders. The Dakota Territory's spring was proving as harsh as the letters from her aunt had warned. She had left everything behind in Boston: her teaching position, her modest apartment, her few friends, all for a man who apparently couldn't be bothered to meet his bride. "Looks like you've been left high and dry, miss," came a deep voice from behind her. Nora turned to find a tall man leaning against the station wall, Stetson pulled low over his eyes, his sheepskin coat dusted with snow. His boots were worn, spurs glinting in the fading light, and a revolver hung at his hip, every inch the frontier cowboy. "I beg your pardon," she managed, drawing herself up despite her distress. He pushed his hat back, revealing piercing blue eyes that caught her off guard. "Forgive me, madam. Couldn't help but notice you've been watching that platform for the better part of an hour." "Isaiah Jackson," he said, tipping his hat. "I run cattle north of town." "Nora Adams," she replied stiffly, "and I'm merely waiting." Isaiah's gaze swept over her city clothes, her trunk, and the desperation she couldn't quite hide. "For someone who ain't coming, by the looks of it." His words were blunt, but his tone held no mockery, just a simple statement of fact. The final whistle blew, and the conductor called out one last time. The station was emptying quickly as the few remaining travelers hurried to escape the worsening weather. "You got somewhere to go, Miss Adams?" Isaiah asked, straightening up. "I," Nora faltered. Theodore had arranged everything. She had the address of their future home scribbled in her journal, but no key, no way to enter what was supposed to be her new life. The money she had saved would last perhaps a week at the hotel at best. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding." Isaiah's expression softened. "Deadwood ain't kind to misunderstandings, especially not in this weather." He glanced at the darkening sky. Storms coming in fast, worse than they predicted. As if to emphasize his point, the wind picked up, driving the snow horizontally across the platform. Nora shivered, her Boston coat inadequate against the Dakota cold. "Look," Isaiah said, "my ranch is a half-day's ride north, got plenty of room. My housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, is there proper as they come. You're welcome to stay until you sort things out." He paused, then added quietly, "Seems to me if your fella was coming, he'd be here. Which means you're free to make your own choices now." Nora stared at him, this stranger offering refuge. Everything she had been taught warned against trusting unknown men on the frontier. But what choice did she have? The station was closing, night was falling, and Theodore had abandoned her. "Then you're free to come with me," Isaiah said simply, extending his hand. "No strings, Miss Adams, just shelter from the storm." Something in his steady gaze made her believe him. With a deep breath, Nora nodded. "Very well, Mr. Jackson. It seems I am indeed free." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. "That's the spirit. Now let's get you and your things to my wagon before we both freeze solid." As Isaiah hefted her trunk onto his shoulder, Nora took one last look down the empty platform, silently saying goodbye to the future she had planned. Then, gathering her courage, she followed the cowboy into the swirling snow, toward an unknown destiny. Isaiah's wagon was sturdy but simple, with a canvas cover that offered minimal protection from the elements. He helped Nora climb onto the wooden seat before securing her trunk in the back. "It's not the most comfortable ride," he apologized, wrapping a thick buffalo hide around her shoulders. "But it'll get us there." "Thank you," Nora replied, pulling the hide closer. The warmth was immediate and welcome. "I've never seen such weather in April." "Dakota Territory doesn't much care what the calendar says," Isaiah chuckled, climbing up beside her. "We get snow well into May sometimes." He clicked his tongue, and the team of horses started forward, pulling them away from the station and into the teeth of the storm. As they left Deadwood behind, Nora's mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Theodore come? Had something happened to him? Or had he simply changed his mind about marrying a woman he knew only through correspondence? Their courtship had been conducted entirely through letters after a brief introduction by her cousin, who had traveled west 2 years prior. Perhaps the reality of her arrival had been too much. "Mind if I ask what brought you to Deadwood?" Isaiah's voice cut through her thoughts. Nora hesitated, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I was to be married. Tomorrow, actually." Isaiah kept his eyes on the road but nodded slowly. "Bride by mail, not exactly. We were introduced through my cousin Martha. We corresponded for nearly 2 years. Theodore Mr. Blackburn owns the mercantile in town. He seemed kind in his letters, stable, a good prospect." "Blackburn?" Isaiah's hands tightened on the reins. "Theodore Blackburn." Something in his tone made Nora turn to study his profile. "Yes. Do you know him?" Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the creak of the wagon and the howl of the wind. "Everyone knows everyone in these parts, Miss Adams, especially businessmen." "And?" she prompted when he didn't continue. He sighed. "It's not my place to speak ill of another man, Mr. Jackson. I've traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry this man who didn't bother to meet me as promised. I believe I deserve whatever information you possess." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Fair enough. Blackburn's not well liked, charges too much, lends money at rates that would make a banker blush, and has a habit of acquiring property when folks can't repay. As for his personal character—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "Please," Nora urged. "I need to know." "He's been seen keeping company with a widow outside of town. For some months now. It's caused talk." Nora felt as though she'd been struck. All those loving letters, the promises of a good life together, while he was courting another woman in person. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Theodore had no intention of meeting her. Perhaps he'd hoped she wouldn't make the journey at all. "I see," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Well, it seems I've had a fortunate escape then." Isaiah glanced at her, surprise and respect mingling in his expression. "That's a mighty pragmatic view, Miss Adams. What would you suggest instead?" "Tears, hysterics. Neither would change my situation, and both would only add to my discomfort in this cold." A small smile tugged at Isaiah's lips. "You're tougher than you look. I'm from Boston, Mr. Jackson. We pride ourselves on practicality." The wagon hit a particularly deep rut, jostling them both. Isaiah steadied her with a strong hand. "Careful now. Road gets worse from here." They fell into silence as Isaiah concentrated on navigating the increasingly treacherous path. The snow was falling more heavily, and darkness had fully descended, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Nora found herself studying her unexpected rescuer in the dim light. Isaiah Jackson was not what she would have called handsome in Boston. His face was too weathered, his features too rugged for society's tastes. But there was something compelling about the strength in his profile, the quiet confidence in his movements. He handled the difficult conditions with a calm competence that Nora found reassuring. "How much farther to your ranch?" she asked after what seemed like hours of slow progress. "Under normal conditions, about 4 hours from town," Isaiah replied, his breath visible in the cold air. "In this might be longer, but I know a place we can stop if it gets too bad. Old line shack about halfway. Used it before when caught in storms." The idea of spending the night in a remote cabin with a man she'd just met should have scandalized Nora. Instead, she found herself surprisingly untroubled by the prospect. There was something trustworthy about Isaiah Jackson, a fundamental decency she sensed beneath his rough exterior. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to keep conversation flowing both for distraction and warmth. "Nothing fancy. 500 acres along the creek. Good grazing land. Started with just 20 head of cattle 5 years ago, built up to nearly 200 now. Got 4 hands working for me, good men, though you won't see much of them. They bunk in the separate quarters." "And you mentioned a housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, widow from Ohio. Husband was killed in a mining accident 3 years back. She keeps the place running smooth as silk, makes sure we all eat something besides beans and hardtack." There was affection in his voice. "She'll be glad for female company. Gets tired of just us cowhands to talk to." "And your family," Nora ventured. "Wife, children?" Isaiah shook his head. "Never married. Parents passed on back in Missouri before I came west. Got a brother in California I haven't seen in years." Nora nodded, understanding the solitude of his life. It wasn't so different from hers in some ways. After her parents died of influenza when she was 20, she'd been on her own, teaching at a small school for girls and living in a modest boarding house. Theodore's proposal had promised security, family, a place to belong. All things she'd been missing. Suddenly, one of the horses whinnied in alarm and the wagon lurched sharply to the right. Isaiah cursed under his breath, pulling hard on the reins. "What is it?" Nora asked, gripping the seat. "Something spooked them. Hold tight." The team was veering off the trail now, the wagon sliding sideways in the snow. Isaiah fought for control, but the frightened horses were beyond listening. With a sickening crack, the wagon hit something solid, a rock or fallen log buried beneath the snow, and tipped precariously. Nora felt herself being thrown and grabbed desperately for anything to hold on to, but it was too late. The world tumbled around her as she was flung from the seat into the deep snow. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. For a moment she lay stunned, the cold seeping through her clothes. Then she heard Isaiah calling her name, his voice tight with concern. "Miss Adams, Nora, are you hurt?" She struggled to sit up, assessing herself quickly. "I'm all right," she called back, relieved to find nothing seemed broken. "Just shaken." Through the swirling snow she saw him approach, leading the horses that had broken free from their harness. Behind him the wagon lay on its side, one wheel completely shattered. "Thank God," he breathed when he reached her, kneeling to help her up. His hands were gentle as he brushed snow from her coat. "Can you stand?" Nora nodded, allowing him to pull her to her feet. She winced as weight fell on her right ankle, not broken but certainly twisted. Isaiah noticed immediately. "You're injured." "It's nothing serious, just a twist." She tried to take a step and couldn't entirely hide her grimace of pain. He frowned, looking from her to the damaged wagon to the worsening storm. "We can't continue like this. That wheel's beyond repair out here." He was silent for a moment, thinking. "The line shack I mentioned is about a mile east. We'll have to leave the wagon and most of your things. I can come back for them when the storm passes." "A mile? In this?" Nora looked dubiously at her throbbing ankle. "I'll carry you if need be," Isaiah said matter-of-factly. "But first things first." He rummaged in the overturned wagon, emerging with a small pack in her valise. Essentials only. Can you ride? It's been many years, Nora admitted. But yes. Isaiah nodded, securing the items to one of the horses. These two are trained for riding as well as pulling. Lucky for us. He fashioned a makeshift bridle from the harness for the second horse, then turned to Nora. I'll help you up. Before she could protest, he had lifted her effortlessly onto the horse's back. The animal shifted nervously beneath her, but Isaiah's steady hand on its neck kept it calm. Just hold onto the mane. He'll follow my lead. Nora adjusted her skirts as best she could, grateful that she had chosen a practical traveling outfit rather than something more fashionable. Boston's sensibilities seemed very far away as she gripped the horse's mane and tried to remember lessons from childhood. Isaiah mounted the other horse with practiced ease, the pack and her valise secured behind him. Stay close, he instructed, and let me know if your ankle gets too painful. They set off at a slow pace, the horses picking their way carefully through the deepening snow. The storm had intensified, the wind cutting through Nora's clothes despite the buffalo hide Isaiah had insisted she keep. She could barely see him riding ahead of her, just a dark shape in the swirling white. Her ankle throbbed with each step the horse took, but she gritted her teeth against the pain. She would not be a burden. Time lost all meaning as they continued. The cold seeped into Nora's bones, and she found herself struggling to stay alert. Just as she felt she couldn't go on much longer, Isaiah called out, "There it is!" Through the snow, Nora could just make out the dark outline of a small cabin. Never had a simple structure looked so welcoming. Isaiah dismounted quickly and came to help her down, his strong hands gentle on her waist. When her feet touched the ground, her injured ankle buckled beneath her. "I've got you," Isaiah murmured, sweeping her into his arms before she could fall. "Let's get you inside and warm." The cabin was small but solid, with a stone fireplace at one end. Isaiah set Nora carefully on a rough-hewn bench near the door, then turned his attention to the horses. "I need to get them settled. There's a lean-to out back. Won't be a minute." Left alone, Nora took stock of her surroundings. The cabin was sparse but clean, clearly maintained for emergency use. A narrow bed stood against one wall, a small table with 2 chairs in the center, and shelves stocked with basic supplies lined another wall. It was a far cry from what she had expected her accommodations to be tonight, but given the circumstances, it seemed like luxury. Isaiah returned quickly, stamping snow from his boots. "Horses are settled with feed. They'll be fine till morning." He moved immediately to the fireplace, where Nora was surprised to see wood already stacked. "Line riders keep these places stocked," he explained, noticing her expression as he began building a fire. "Basic supplies, firewood, some food, saves lives out here." Within minutes, a small fire was crackling, its warmth beginning to fill the tiny cabin. Isaiah hung his snow-covered coat near the door, then helped Nora remove her damp cloak and boots. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he examined her ankle. "Swollen, but doesn't look too bad," he pronounced. "Should keep it elevated, though." He helped her to the bed, arranging her injured foot on a folded blanket. "Rest here. I'll see what supplies we have." The simple domesticity of the situation struck Nora as Isaiah moved about the cabin, checking shelves and storage bins. This was not at all how she had imagined her arrival in Dakota territory. By now, she should have been in Theodore's home, preparing for tomorrow's wedding. Instead, she was stranded in a lined shack with a cowboy she had met just hours ago. Strangely, she felt no fear, no regret. If anything, there was a curious sense of relief. Theodore's absence at the station now seemed providential rather than tragic. "Good news," Isaiah announced, interrupting her thoughts. "We've got beans, coffee, jerky, and even some hardtack. Not exactly a wedding feast, but it'll keep us going." He paused, looking embarrassed. "Sorry, that was thoughtless of me." Nora smiled, surprising herself. "No need to apologize. I find I'm not particularly mourning the loss of my wedding day anymore, not after what you told me about Mr. Blackburn." Isaiah set a pot of water to heat at the edge of the fire. "Still, it's a hard thing, coming all this way for nothing." "Not nothing," Nora corrected him. "I came for a new beginning. The form it takes might be different than I expected, but the opportunity remains." She glanced around the cabin. "Though I admit, I hadn't pictured quite such rustic accommodations for my first night in Dakota territory." That drew a laugh from Isaiah, a warm, rich sound that seemed to fill the small space. "Wait till you see the ranch. Practically a palace compared to this." As he prepared their simple meal, Nora found herself studying him again. His movements were efficient, practiced a man accustomed to taking care of himself and others. There was a quiet strength about him that she found appealing, so different from the refined but ultimately hollow promises Theodore had offered in his letters. "May I ask you something, Mr. Jackson?" "Isaiah, please." He glanced up from the beans he was stirring. "Seems like we've moved past formalities given the circumstances." "Isaiah, then." The name felt right on her lips. "Why did you stop to help me at the station? You must have had other matters to attend to in town." He was quiet for a moment, focusing on their meal. "Saw the same look on your face that I had when I first came west," he finally said. "Lost. Determined not to show it, but lost all the same." He served the beans into 2 tin plates, bringing one to her. "Nobody helped me then. Figured I could do better by you." There was more to the story, Nora sensed, but she didn't press. They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling and the storm howling outside. The simple food was surprisingly satisfying, or perhaps it was just the warmth and safety after their ordeal that made it seem so. "You should take the bed," Isaiah said as they finished eating. "I'll make do on the floor." "That hardly seems fair." "You're the reason we're not frozen in that snowdrift." He shook his head firmly. "Wouldn't be proper any other way. Besides, I've slept on worse than this floor plenty of times." Nora wanted to argue but could see it would be futile. Instead, she said, "Thank you. Not just for the bed, but for everything today. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there." "You'd have managed," Isaiah said with quiet confidence. "You strike me as the type who always does, but I'm glad I was there all the same." Their eyes met across the small space, and something passed between them, a moment of recognition, of connection that went beyond their unusual circumstances. Nora felt her cheeks flush and looked away first, suddenly conscious of their isolation. "I should try to get some rest," she said, arranging herself more comfortably on the narrow bed. "It's been a rather eventful day." Isaiah nodded, adding another log to the fire. "Sleep well, Miss Adams." "Nora," she corrected softly. "As you said, we've moved past formalities." His smile was the last thing she saw before closing her eyes. "Good night, Nora." Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Her ankle throbbed dully, and her mind kept replaying the day's events. Theodore's absence, Isaiah's unexpected appearance, the storm, the accident. It was almost too much to process. And beneath it all was a growing awareness of the man sleeping just feet away, his breathing deep and even in the firelit darkness. What kind of woman was she, to feel this pull toward a virtual stranger when she should be heartbroken over her abandoned wedding? Perhaps the journey west had changed her more than she realized. Or perhaps Isaiah Jackson was simply the kind of man worth noticing. With these thoughts swirling through her mind, Nora finally drifted into a fitful sleep, the storm still raging beyond the cabin walls. Morning brought an eerie silence. The howling wind had ceased, and when Nora opened her eyes, The cabin was filled with a soft, diffuse light filtering through frost-covered windows. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself, memories of the previous day flooding back. The cabin was warm, the fire still burning low. Isaiah was nowhere to be seen, but a cup of coffee sat steaming on the small table beside the bed, along with a note scrawled on a scrap of paper. "Gone to check on horses. Back soon." Nora sat up carefully, testing her ankle. The swelling had subsided somewhat, though it was still tender. She managed to stand and made her way to the window, wincing slightly with each step. Outside, the world was transformed. Snow blanketed everything, smooth and pristine in the early morning light, drifted high against the cabin walls. It would be beautiful if it weren't so daunting. The door opened with a gust of cold air, and Isaiah stepped inside, shaking snow from his hat. His cheeks were ruddy from the cold, his breath visible in the chilled air he brought with him. "You're up," he said, smiling as he closed the door. "How's the ankle?" "Better, I think." "Your coffee was a welcome sight." He hung his coat by the door. "Figured you could use it. Storms passed, but we've got almost 2 feet of new snow out there, trails completely buried." Nora's heart sank. "What does that mean for us?" "Means we're not going anywhere just yet." He moved to the fire, adding more wood. "Not with that wagon out of commission and your ankle still healing. Probably best to stay put today, see if some of this melts tomorrow." Another day confined in this small cabin with Isaiah. Nora wasn't sure if the flutter in her stomach was apprehension or something else entirely. "What about your ranch? Won't your housekeeper be worried?" "Mrs. Finch knows I sometimes get delayed in town, especially if there's a storm brewing. She won't start worrying for another day or two." He paused, studying her. "Unless you're uncomfortable staying here, I could try to get you back to Deadwood, though it'd be a hard journey." "No," Nora said quickly, surprising herself with her certainty. "That is, I'm not uncomfortable. This seems the most sensible option given the circumstances." Isaiah nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Good. Now how about some breakfast? Line shacks don't stock eggs or bacon, but I've got some oats we can cook up." They settled into a strangely comfortable routine as the day progressed. Isaiah prepared a simple breakfast, then set about improving their situation, reinforcing the lean to where the horses were sheltered, bringing in more firewood from the stack behind the cabin, taking inventory of their supplies. Nora insisted on helping despite her ankle, organizing their meager food stores and tidying the small space. By midday, the sun had emerged, its light blinding on the fresh snow. Isaiah suggested Nora sit outside for a bit, to keep from going cabin crazy, as he put it. He positioned a chair from inside near the door, where the overhang kept the snow at bay, and wrapped her in the buffalo hide before returning to his tasks. Nora breathed deeply of the crisp air, watching as Isaiah moved about the clearing, strong and capable. It was a different kind of life than she had imagined for herself, but there was something appealing in its directness, its lack of pretense. In Boston, everything had been about appearances, about maintaining a facade of propriety even when struggling. Here, survival was what mattered: practical skills, hard work, and honesty. "Penny for your thoughts?" Isaiah asked, coming to stand beside her chair, his breath clouding in the cold air. "I was just thinking how different everything is here, how different I feel, different good or different bad." Nora smiled up at him. "Different good, I think. In Boston, I was always Miss Adams, the schoolteacher, proper, respectable, but contained somehow. Here, even stranded in a snowstorm with a twisted ankle, I feel more myself than I have in years." Isaiah leaned against the cabin wall, regarding her thoughtfully. "The West has a way of stripping away the unnecessary, leaving just what matters. Some folks can't handle that kind of clarity. Sounds like you're not one of them." "I suppose we'll see," Nora replied. "Once we get to your ranch, I'll need to decide what comes next. Without Theodore's offer of marriage, my plans are rather up in the air." "You could go back east," Isaiah suggested, though something in his tone suggested he didn't favor this option. "I could. But I didn't come all this way just to turn around at the first setback." She gazed out at the snow-covered landscape. "No, I think I'll stay in Dakota Territory, at least for a while. Find work if I can. Perhaps Deadwood needs a school teacher." Isaiah's expression brightened. "As a matter of fact, they do. Town's been growing fast, lots of families moving in. The schoolhouse was finished last fall, but they've had trouble finding someone qualified to teach." Hope surged through Nora. "Really? That would be perfect. I have 8 years of teaching experience." "I'm on the town council," Isaiah said. "Not that my word alone would get you the position, but I'd be happy to make introductions, speak on your behalf." "You're on the town council? I wouldn't have guessed," he chuckled. "Don't let the rough exterior fool you. Some of us are trying to bring civilization to Deadwood, bit by bit. Good school's part of that." The pieces of a possible future began to form in Nora's mind, not the one she had traveled west for, but perhaps a better one. Teaching again, building a life in this raw, beautiful place. And Isaiah? Where did he fit into this new vision? She was saved from examining that question too closely when one of the horses whinnied sharply from the lean-to. Isaiah straightened, instantly alert. "What is it?" Nora asked. "Not sure. Horses are nervous about something." He reached for the rifle he'd left leaning against the cabin wall. "Stay here." Nora watched anxiously as he moved toward the lean-to, rifle at the ready. The snow made it difficult for him to move quietly, each step crunching loudly in the stillness. He disappeared around the corner of the structure, and for several long moments there was silence. Then she heard him call out, his voice relieved. "It's all right, just a fox nosing around." He reappeared, rifle lowered, smiling at her concern. "Wildlife gets bold when food's scarce." He was probably hoping for some grain. "I thought perhaps it was someone coming to rescue us," Nora said, only half joking. "In this snow, not likely. Though if we're not back by tomorrow, Mrs. Finch might send one of the hands to look for me." He glanced at the sky, where clouds were beginning to gather again. "We should get inside. Temperature's dropping, and those clouds don't look friendly." Back in the cabin's warmth, Isaiah busied himself preparing their evening meal, more beans, supplemented with jerky and the last of the hardtack. Nora watched him work, struck again by his easy competence. She had expected Theodore to provide for her, to give her the security she lacked. Now she wondered if that expectation had been too limited. Isaiah provided security too, but in a different way, not through possession or control, but through capability and respect. "You're staring, Miss Adams," Isaiah remarked without looking up from his cooking. Nora felt her cheeks flush. "I apologize, I was just thinking about the strange paths life takes us down. Yesterday morning, I was on a train bound for what I thought was my future. Now I'm stranded in a lined shack with a man I barely know, contemplating an entirely different life." Isaiah turned to face her then, his expression serious. "Life out here changes fast. You learn to adapt or you don't survive. But for what it's worth, I think you'd make a fine addition to Deadwood, school teacher or otherwise." The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the fire. "Thank you. That means a great deal, especially considering our brief acquaintance. Some folks you know for years and never really know them. Others." He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "Supper's ready." They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling and occasional gusts of wind rattling the cabin's single window. Outside, darkness was falling rapidly. and with it came a renewed sense of isolation, just the two of them in this small sanctuary against the wilderness. After their meal, Isaiah insisted on checking Nora's ankle again. His touch was gentle as he examined the swelling, his calloused fingers careful against her skin. Nora found herself holding her breath at the contact, aware of him in a way that both thrilled and unsettled her. "Looking better," he pronounced. "Should be well enough to travel by tomorrow, especially if we go slow." "You seem very knowledgeable about injuries," Nora observed, trying to distract herself from the lingering warmth where his hands had been. "Spend enough time on a ranch, you learn to patch up all sorts of things: horses, cattle, cowboys," he replied with a half-smile. "Had my share of breaks and sprains over the years. Is ranching always so dangerous? Not always, but it's never entirely safe either. That's part of why I do it, I suppose. The challenge, the constant need to stay alert, to solve problems as they arise." He settled back in his chair. "What about teaching? What drew you to that?" Nora considered the question. No one had ever really asked her that before. "I've always loved learning, the moment when understanding dawns in someone's eyes, and I suppose it gave me purpose after my parents died, a way to contribute, to belong somewhere." "Were you happy teaching in Boston?" "Content, perhaps. Not unhappy, certainly." She paused, reflecting. "But something was missing. That's partly why Theodore's letters were so appealing. They promised adventure, a new beginning, a family of my own someday." "And now, what do you want now?" His gaze was intense, searching. The question caught her off guard. What did she want? Security, yes. Purpose, certainly. But there was something else now, something awakened by the past day's events, by the man sitting across from her. "I want to live more fully," she said finally. "To experience this place, this life, without the constraints I've always accepted. To be braver than I've been before." Something flickered in Isaiah's eyes, approval perhaps, or understanding. "The West is a good place for starting fresh, for finding out who you really are beneath all the trappings of civilization." "And who are you, Isaiah Jackson, beneath your trappings?" Nora asked boldly. He looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Just a man trying to build something worthwhile, something that might last beyond me." He stood abruptly. "It's getting late. We should probably turn in if we're to make an early start tomorrow." The moment had passed, whatever connection they'd been building retreating behind his sudden formality. Nora nodded, accepting the shift. "Of course. Thank you again for the bed." "Think nothing of it," he replied, arranging his bedroll near the fire. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Isaiah." As she lay in the darkness, listening to the wind and Isaiah's steady breathing, Nora wondered at her disappointment. It was foolish to feel anything for this man she had known for barely a day. Yet there was something between them, something real and powerful that had nothing to do with her abandoned wedding or their forced proximity. Tomorrow, they would leave for his ranch, and then decisions would need to be made about her future. But tonight, in the stillness of the lined shack, Nora allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She was drawn to Isaiah Jackson in a way she had never been drawn to Theodore Blackburn, despite 2 years of correspondence. Whether that attraction was wise or foolish remained to be seen. The morning brought clearer skies and a noticeable warming in the air. Nora woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Isaiah moving quietly about the cabin, packing their few belongings. Her ankle felt much improved, with only a slight twinge when she put weight on it. "Good morning," Isaiah greeted her, handing her a cup of steaming coffee. "How's the patient today?" "Much better," Nora replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "I think I can ride without difficulty." "Good, because the snow's already starting to melt." "Best we get going while the trail's still firm. Once it turns to mud, travel gets twice as hard." He nodded toward her valise, which he had brought in from where it was stored with the horses. I've left out a change of clothes for you. Figured you might want to freshen up before we head out." Nora appreciated his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. How long do you think it will take to reach your ranch, given the conditions, probably most of the day? We'll need to take it slow." He gathered his coat and hat. "I'll go see to the horses, give you some privacy." Once alone, Nora quickly changed into her cleanest remaining dress, a practical navy wool that had survived the journey relatively unwrinkled. She washed her face and hands in the basin of melted snow Isaiah had left warming near the fire, and arranged her hair as best she could without a mirror. It wasn't the presentation she had hoped to make upon arriving in Deadwood, but it would have to do. Isaiah returned as she was repacking her valise. "Ready?" he asked, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied with a small smile. He nodded, shouldering her valise along with his own pack. "Let's go then. Horses are saddled and waiting." Outside, the transformation was remarkable. The previous day's pristine snowscape was now patchy, with areas of dark earth showing through where the morning sun had been strongest. The air was noticeably warmer, almost pleasant. Isaiah helped Nora mount one of the horses, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "We'll leave a note about the wagon," he explained as he checked the horse's girth. "One of my hands can come back with tools to repair it and retrieve the rest of your things once we're home." Home. The word sent a curious pang through Nora. Isaiah's home, not hers. Yet she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like, this ranch he spoke of with such pride. They set off at a careful pace, the horses picking their way through the melting snow. Despite the improved weather, travel was challenging. The trail alternated between slippery ice, deep slush, and occasional patches of mud. Isaiah led the way, constantly checking back to ensure Nora was managing. "How did you come to own a ranch?" she asked during one of their brief rest stops, curious about the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. Isaiah handed her a water canteen before answering. "Came west after the war with nothing but my horse and what I could carry. Worked as a hand on different ranches for years, saved every penny. 5 years ago, old man Reeves wanted to sell his place and move back east. Wasn't much run-down cabin, couple 100 acres of decent grazing land, small herd, but it was a start. You've done well from what you've told me." "Been lucky," he said modestly. "Had some good years, made some smart decisions. Got a good crew working for me now, Miguel, Charlie, and the Walker brothers, Tom and Joe. Mrs. Finch keeps us all in line." He smiled at the mention of his housekeeper. "You'll like her. Speaks her mind, but has a heart of gold." "She sounds wonderful," Nora replied, trying to imagine the woman who maintained order in a household of cowboys. "She is. Lost her husband in a cave-in at one of the mines. No children. Ranch gives her purpose, I think, same as it does for me." They continued on, the conversation flowing easily between them as the miles passed. Isaiah told stories of his early days in Dakota Territory, the challenges and triumphs of building his ranch. Nora shared tales of her teaching experiences, the students who had touched her heart, the satisfaction of seeing young minds develop. As the day wore on, the landscape gradually changed. The dense forest through which they had traveled began to give way to more open country, rolling hills covered in patches of snow and early spring grass, stands of pine and aspen scattered across the landscape. In the distance, mountains rose, their peaks still white against the blue sky. "It's beautiful," Nora breathed, taking in the vista. "This is the edge of my property," Isaiah said, pride evident in his voice. "Another hour or so to the ranch house." The trail improved as they descended into a broad valley, following a creek that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Cattle appeared, scattered across the hillside's red-brown shapes against the patchy white and green landscape. "Part of your herd?" Nora asked. Isaiah nodded. "Winter pasture. They'll move higher up as summer comes." He pointed ahead. "You can just see the ranch house now there, where that stand of cottonwoods meets the creek." Nora squinted, making out a cluster of buildings in the distance. As they drew closer, she could distinguish a substantial log house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings and corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, a welcoming sight after their long journey. A figure emerged from the barn as they approached a tall, lean man who waved when he spotted them. "That's Charlie," Isaiah explained. "Best horse breaker in 3 territories." Charlie hurried to meet them as they reached the main yard. "Boss, was starting to wonder if we needed to send out a search party. Storm was something fierce up here." "Got caught in it on the way back," Isaiah replied, dismounting. "Had to wait it out at the North Line shack." He helped Nora down from her horse, mindful of her ankle. "Charlie, this is Miss Nora Adams. Miss Adams, Charlie Winters, my foreman." Charlie tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, welcome to Jackson Ranch." "Thank you," Nora replied, taking in her surroundings. The ranch was well kept, orderly, with a sense of purpose about it. Isaiah had built something impressive here, far from the chaotic mining town of Deadwood. "Where are the others?" Isaiah asked, handing the horse's reins to Charlie. "Miguel and Joe are checking the east pasture fences. Tom's in town picking up supplies." Charlie glanced curiously between Isaiah and Nora, but asked no questions about her presence. "Mrs. Finch is inside, probably has dinner near ready. She's been watching the trail all day." As if on cue, the door of the main house opened, and a stout woman in a practical calico dress and apron appeared on the porch. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but her face lit up at the sight of Isaiah. "There you are." "Had me worried half to death," she called, wiping her hands on her apron as she descended the steps. Her gaze fell on Nora, curiosity replacing relief. "And who's this you've brought home?" Isaiah explained the situation briefly: Nora's arrival in Deadwood, Theodore's absence, the storm, and their mishap with the wagon. Mrs. Finch listened with increasing indignation on Nora's behalf. "The nerve of some men," she exclaimed when Isaiah finished. "Leaving a lady stranded at the station. If I ever see this Theodore Blackburn, I'll give him a piece of my mind." She turned to Nora with genuine warmth. "You poor dear. What an ordeal. Well, you're welcome here for as long as you need. I've got the guest room already, been keeping it prepared in case Isaiah ever decided to bring civilization home with him." She shot him a meaningful look that made Nora wonder about previous conversations between them. "Thank you, Mrs. Finch," Nora said, touched by the immediate acceptance. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," the older woman interrupted. "It's no imposition to have another woman around this place. Too much male company dulls the wits." She took Nora's arm. "Now come inside and warm up. Dinner's nearly ready, and you look like you could use a good meal and a hot bath." Isaiah watched with amusement as Mrs. Finch led Nora toward the house. "I'll see to the horses," he called after them. "Be in shortly." The ranch house was surprisingly spacious and comfortable. The main room combined living and dining areas, with a large stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture, and shelves lined with books, more than Nora would have expected on a frontier ranch. Colorful woven rugs softened the plank floors, and curtains hung at the windows. It was masculine in its simplicity, but showed signs of Mrs. Finch's influence in its organization and homey touches. "This is lovely," Nora said sincerely. "Not at all what I expected." Mrs. Finch beamed with pride. "Isaiah's made a good home here." Started with just a one-room cabin, built most of this himself with help from the boys. She ushered Nora toward a hallway. "Guest rooms this way, baths through there." She pointed to another door. "I'll heat water while you get settled." The guest room was small but charming, with a brass bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with pitcher and bowl, and a small wardrobe. A window looked out over the creek and distant hills. "Perfect for catching the morning sun, Mrs. Finch commented, setting Nora's valise on a chest at the foot of the bed. "Now, let's see about that bath. You must be exhausted after your journey." Within the hour, Nora was soaking in a copper tub filled with steaming water, a luxury she hadn't expected to find on a Dakota Territory ranch. The heat soothed her still tender ankle and washed away the grime and tension of the past days. By the time she dressed in her cleanest remaining clothes and joined the others for dinner, she felt almost human again. The dining table was set for 5 Isaiah, Mrs. Finch, Charlie, and another cowhand who was introduced as Miguel Rodriguez, a skilled horseman from Texas with a quiet demeanor and respectful manner. Tom and Joe were still out checking fences and would eat later. The meal was simple but abundant: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with the men discussing ranch business and Mrs. Finch occasionally interjecting with practical concerns about supplies or household matters. They made efforts to include Nora, explaining references she wouldn't understand, asking polite questions about her journey west. Throughout the meal, Nora found her gaze drawn repeatedly to Isaiah. In this setting, surrounded by the life he had built, he seemed even more substantial, more real than he had during their isolated time at the line shack. He listened attentively to his workers, respected Mrs. Finch's opinions, and managed the conversation with an easy authority that spoke of natural leadership. When the meal was finished, Charlie and Miguel excused themselves to attend to evening chores. Mrs. Finch began clearing the table, waving away Nora's offer of help. "You're our guest tonight," she insisted. "Besides, that ankle needs rest. Why don't you and Isaiah sit by the fire? I'll bring coffee." Isaiah led Nora to the sitting area near the fireplace, waiting until she was comfortably settled in an armchair before taking a seat across from her. The firelight cast a warm glow over the room, creating an intimate atmosphere despite the house's size. "Your home is wonderful," Nora said sincerely. "You've accomplished so much here. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but worth it." He gazed into the fire for a moment. "What do you think of Dakota Territory so far? Despite the rather challenging introduction, it's beautiful. Harsher than I expected, but there's something honest about it. No pretense. The land is what it is, and people must adapt to it rather than the other way around." Isaiah nodded, pleased with her assessment. "That's exactly it. Boston must seem very far away now." "In more ways than distance," Nora agreed. "I hardly recognize the woman who boarded that train a week ago. So many certainties shattered in such a short time. Regrets." His voice was quiet, his eyes intent on her face. Nora considered the question carefully. "About leaving Boston?" "No. About agreeing to marry Theodore based on nothing but letters and second-hand recommendations. Perhaps I should have been more cautious, but I can't regret the journey itself, or—" She hesitated, then finished softly, "or meeting you." Something shifted in Isaiah's expression, a softening, a vulnerability he hadn't shown before. Before he could respond, Mrs. Finch returned with a tray bearing coffee and slices of apple pie. "Here we are," she announced, setting the tray on a small table between them. "Nothing like good coffee and pie to end the day." She gave them each a pointed look. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything more." As she departed, Nora couldn't help but notice the knowing smile on the older woman's face. Apparently, Mrs. Finch had drawn her own conclusions about the nature of Nora's arrival at the ranch. Isaiah cleared his throat, seeming slightly embarrassed. Mrs. Finch has been trying to marry me off for years. Pay her no mind. She seems very fond of you, Nora observed, accepting the coffee he offered. She's been like family since she came here. Keeps me honest, makes sure I remember there's more to life than cattle and horses. He took a sip of his coffee. Speaking of which, we should discuss your plans. I meant what I said about helping you secure the teaching position in Deadwood, if that's what you want. That's very kind of you. Teaching is what I know, and I would be grateful for your assistance. Nora hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. Would it be possible for me to stay here until arrangements are made? I could help Mrs. Finch earn my keep. I don't want to impose, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need, Isaiah interrupted. It's no imposition. In fact, he stopped, seeming to consider his next words carefully. In fact, I'd be honored if you'd consider this a place you could call home, at least temporarily. There was something in his tone, something beyond mere hospitality that made Nora's heart quicken. Thank you. That means more than I can express. They lapsed into silence, the crackling fire and distant sounds of the ranch the only background to their thoughts. Nora found herself studying Isaiah's profile, the strong lines of his face illuminated by the flickering light. In just days, this man had gone from stranger to what? Rescuer, friend. Something else entirely. You're staring again, Miss Adams, Isaiah said softly, echoing his words from the line shack, but this time his gaze met hers directly. Nora didn't look away. I was thinking that fate works in curious ways. If Theodore had met me at the station as planned, I would never have known you existed. And if that storm hadn't blown in, I would have delivered you to the Deadwood Hotel and tipped my hat goodbye, Isaiah added. Do you believe in destiny, Mr. Jackson? That some things are meant to be? He considered the question seriously. I believe we make choices, and those choices set us on paths that lead to other choices. But sometimes, he smiled slightly. Sometimes it does seem like larger forces are at work. What about you? I never did before, Nora admitted, but the past few days have made me wonder. She set down her coffee cup, suddenly bold. Isaiah, I know we've known each other only briefly, but I feel a knock at the door interrupted her. Isaiah rose, looking both relieved and disappointed at the interruption. That'll be Tom returning from town. He crossed to the door and opened it to reveal a young cowboy stamping snow from his boots. Evening, boss. Got those supplies you wanted, plus the mail. He handed over a stack of envelopes, then noticed Nora by the fire. Madam, he acknowledged with a tip of his hat. Thanks, Tom. Anything else to report? Isaiah asked, thumbing through the mail. Just that there's talk in town about Theodore Blackburn. Seems he's left Deadwood rather suddenly. Sold his store to Johnson 2 days ago and took the stage south. Something about business opportunities in Cheyenne. Nora felt a jolt of surprise. So Theodore had truly abandoned her, even fled town to avoid the consequences of his actions. The realization should have hurt, but instead, she felt only a curious sense of relief. The last thread tying her to her old plans had been severed. Isaiah glanced at her with concern. You all right? She nodded, finding it was true. Yes, surprisingly so. Tom looked confused by the exchange but was too polite to question it. Mrs. Finch left some supper warming for me. In the kitchen, Isaiah confirmed. Get some rest after you eat. We've got a full day tomorrow. After Tom departed, Isaiah returned to his seat by the fire, tossing the mail onto the side table. Well, that answers one question. Blackburn's gone. It seems I truly am free to make my own way now, Nora said, a note of wonder in her voice. "Does that frighten you?" Isaiah asked quietly. "It should, shouldn't it? No fiancé, no home, no position, in a strange place far from everything familiar." She smiled, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. "But no, it doesn't frighten me. It feels like possibility." Isaiah leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Nora, I know this is sudden. We've known each other only days, but I feel something between us that I've never felt before, something real, something worth exploring." He took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for promises or commitments, just time. Time for us to know each other better, to see if what I feel, what I hope you feel too, is as genuine as I believe it to be." Nora's heart raced at his words, at the honesty in his eyes. This was so different from Theodore's careful letters, his distant courtship. This was immediate, visceral, frightening in its intensity. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "This connection between us, it makes no logical sense. We're virtual strangers, and yet, he echoed, reaching across to take her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from work, strong and gentle at once. "Will you stay, Nora? Not just until arrangements are made for teaching, but to give us a chance to discover what this might become." The question hung between them, momentous in its simplicity. A fork in the road of her life, a choice that would alter everything that followed. Nora looked at their joined hands, then up into Isaiah's hopeful eyes. "Yes," she said, the word feeling right, feeling true. "Yes, I'll stay." His smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains, warm, brilliant, full of promise. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. In that moment, with the fire crackling and the vast Dakota night pressing against the windows, Nora knew she had made the right choice. Theodore's absence at the station hadn't been abandonment at all, but liberation, the first step on a path that had led her here, to this man, to this possibility of love more real than anything she had imagined. The days that followed took on a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Nora's ankle healed quickly, allowing her to explore the ranch and learn its routines. Mrs. Finch welcomed her assistance in the house, teaching her the particular challenges of maintaining a home on the frontier. The ranch hands were respectful, if somewhat bemused by her presence, but soon adjusted to having another woman in their midst. Isaiah was busy with spring ranch work, checking on cattle that had survived the winter, repairing fences damaged by snow and wind, preparing for the coming calving season. But he made time each day to spend with Nora, showing her his land, telling her stories of how he had built his operation piece by piece. Their conversations ranged widely: books they had read, places they hoped to see, dreams they still harbored. Each revelation, each shared thought, strengthened the connection between them. A week after her arrival, Isaiah drove Nora into Deadwood to speak with the town council about the teaching position. The transformation of the mining camp into a proper town was still in progress. Muddy streets lined with a mix of substantial buildings and hastily constructed shacks, saloons doing business alongside new churches and shops. It was a place of contrasts, of ambition and desperation side by side. The council members were impressed with Nora's credentials and experience, and Isaiah's recommendation carried significant weight. The position was offered on the spot, classes to begin in 2 weeks, once the schoolhouse could be properly prepared. A small cottage behind the school would serve as her residence, included with her salary. "You could live at the ranch and ride in each day," Isaiah suggested as they left the meeting. "It's not too far." "In good weather, perhaps," Nora replied, thinking of the blizzard that had stranded them. "But what about winter?" "True." He looked thoughtful. "Though winter's a long way off yet, we have time to figure things out." The unspoken question hung between them: what would their relationship be by the time snow fell again? Neither was ready to define it further, content for now to let it unfold naturally. As they walked down the main street, a woman emerged from the mercantile now under new ownership, as Tom had reported. She paused when she saw them, then approached with determination. "Isaiah Jackson, as I live and breathe. Haven't seen you in town for weeks." Her gaze shifted to Nora, curious and slightly wary. "Hello, Rebecca," Isaiah replied, his tone polite but reserved. "Allow me to introduce Miss Nora Adams, Deadwood's new schoolteacher. Nora, this is Mrs. Rebecca Lawson." Understanding dawned on Nora. This must be the widow Isaiah had mentioned, the one Theodore had been courting while exchanging letters with her. The woman was striking, with auburn hair and a confident bearing. Her dress was fashionable but practical for frontier life. "Miss Adams," Rebecca acknowledged, "welcome to Deadwood. We're in desperate need of education here." She turned back to Isaiah. "Will you be at the Founders' Day dance next month? The committee is counting on your support." "Wouldn't miss it," Isaiah replied. "Nora will be accompanying me if she's agreeable." Nora felt a small thrill at the public claim at being included in his plans so naturally. "I'd be delighted," she said. Rebecca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Wonderful. Well, I mustn't keep you. Good day to you both." As she walked away, Nora glanced at Isaiah questioningly. "Former suitor?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Not really," he replied. "There was a time when she made her interest known, but I didn't reciprocate. She's a good woman, just not." He trailed off. "Not." Isaiah met her gaze directly. "Not you." The simple statement sent warmth flooding through Nora. They continued their tour of the town, finalizing arrangements for her position, purchasing supplies she would need, and retrieving the trunk that had been left at the station. If anyone wondered about the Eastern woman who had arrived as Theodore Blackburn's bride-to-be and was now clearly under Isaiah Jackson's protection, they were too polite or too intimidated to ask directly. As they drove back to the ranch that evening, the setting sun painting the landscape in gold and amber, Nora felt a contentment she had rarely experienced. The future still held uncertainties, but they no longer seemed threatening, just part of the adventure that was unfolding. Spring advanced rapidly across the Dakota plains. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and new calves dotted the ranch's pastures. Nora divided her time between preparing for her teaching duties and learning about ranch life. Isaiah proved a patient teacher, showing her how to ride properly, explaining the cycles of the seasons and the work they demanded, introducing her to the rhythm of life on the frontier. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, physical attraction complemented by growing respect and genuine affection. Isaiah was unfailingly considerate, never pushing for more than Nora was ready to give, but the current between them strengthened steadily. Their first kiss came on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after Nora's arrival. They had ridden to a high meadow overlooking the ranch, a special place Isaiah wanted to share with her. Wildflowers nodded in the breeze, and the view stretched for miles. The ranch buildings nestled by the creek, cattle grazing in the lower pastures, distant mountains framing the scene. "I come here to think," Isaiah said, helping Nora down from her horse. "To remember why I do this, what I'm building toward." "It's breathtaking," Nora replied, turning slowly to take in the panorama. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Isaiah stood close behind her, his voice soft near her ear. "I want to share everything with you, Nora. My land, my work, my life." She turned to face him, her heart beating rapidly at the intensity in his eyes. "Isaiah, I know it's soon," he said quickly. "Too soon, perhaps, but I've never been one to hide what I feel and what I feel for you." He took her hands in his, It grows stronger every day. For me as well, Nora admitted. I came west seeking security, a practical arrangement I never expected. She smiled up at him. I never expected you. Isaiah's hands moved to frame her face, gentle as if she were something infinitely precious. May I kiss you, Nora Adams? In answer, she rose on tiptoes, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with tenderness that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more passionate. Nora's arms wrapped around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss continued, both of them lost in the discovery of each other. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, he whispered. Have been since I saw you standing alone on that platform. I think perhaps I started falling when you said then you're free to come with me, Nora confessed. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once, this stranger offering not just help but choice. Freedom, he smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And now, are you still free, Nora Adams? She considered the question seriously. Free to choose. And I choose this you, us, whatever we might become together. They sealed the declaration with another kiss, the spring breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers around them, the sun warm on their shoulders. It was a perfect moment, one Nora knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The following weeks brought new developments. Nora began teaching at the Deadwood School, quickly winning the respect of both students and parents with her combination of academic rigor and genuine care. The cottage behind the schoolhouse was made ready, and though she maintained it as her official residence, she spent most evenings and weekends at the ranch, returning to town each morning for classes. Isaiah was occupied with spring cattle work, but made time to visit her in town when ranch duties kept him too busy for her to come to him. They became a recognized couple in Deadwood society, such as it was in the still rough mining town. Some raised eyebrows at the rapid courtship, especially given Nora's arrival as another man's intended bride, but most accepted their relationship without comment. Summer arrived with long, golden days and short, star-filled nights. The Founders' Day dance marked a milestone, their first public event together, a declaration of sorts. Nora wore her best dress, saved from her trousseau, while Isaiah cleaned up impressively in a proper suit that revealed a more polished side to the usually practical rancher. You look beautiful, he told her as they entered the newly constructed town hall. Every man here will envy me tonight. Nora blushed at the compliment. And every woman will wonder what I did to capture the attention of Deadwood's most eligible bachelor. Isaiah laughed, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. They need only talk to you for 5 minutes to understand. The evening was a whirl of introductions, conversation, and dancing. Isaiah was clearly respected in the community, greeted warmly by businessmen and working folk alike. Nora met the wives of council members, the owners of shops where she traded, parents of her students building her own place in the town's social fabric. Rebecca Lawson was there, elegant in burgundy silk, her manner perfectly cordial as she exchanged pleasantries with them. If she harbored any resentment over Isaiah's obvious devotion to Nora, she hid it well. As the night progressed, the band struck up a waltz. Isaiah led Nora onto the floor, his hand warm at her waist. "Did I mention you look beautiful tonight?" he murmured as they moved to the music. "You did," Nora smiled up at him, "but I don't mind hearing it again." He guided her expertly through the steps, another surprise from this man of many layers. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment, his expression turning serious, "about us, about the future." Nora's heart quickened. "Oh, I know we haven't known each other long, not even 3 months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He drew a deep breath. "I love you, Nora Adams. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." They continued to dance, but Nora felt as though time had suspended around them, the rest of the room fading away. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Isaiah Jackson?" His blue eyes held hers, steady and sure. "Not here, not like this, but soon. I wanted you to know my intentions. To give you time to consider what you want." "What if I already know what I want?" she asked softly. A smile spread across his face, hopeful but still cautious. "And what might that be?" Nora said simply. "A life with you, a future we build together." Isaiah's arm tightened around her waist, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her right there on the dance floor. Instead, he controlled himself, saying quietly, "Tomorrow. Ride with me tomorrow back to the meadow. Let me do this properly." The waltz ended, but the promise of tomorrow hung between them, sweeter than any music. The proposal, when it came, was everything Nora could have wished for. Isaiah brought her to the wildflower meadow where they had first kissed, now in full summer bloom. He had prepared a picnic lunch, spread on a blanket beneath a solitary pine tree. After they ate, he took her hands in his and dropped to one knee. "Nora Adams, you came into my life unexpectedly, a gift I never thought to receive. These past months have been the happiest I've known. You've brought light and joy to my days, purpose and hope to my future." He reached into his pocket, producing a small velvet box. "I love you with all that I am, and I want nothing more than to spend my life showing you that love, day after day, year after year." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring, a small diamond flanked by sapphires. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Nora's vision as she gazed at the man before her, strong, kind, honorable Isaiah, offering her his heart, his name, his future. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Isaiah, I will marry you." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood, drawing her into his arms, and this kiss was different from all those that had come before, a promise, a covenant between them. When they parted, Isaiah kept her close, his expression a mix of happiness and something more serious. "There's something I should tell you, something I want you to understand before you fully commit to this life with me." Nora tensed slightly, uncertain what revelation might follow. "What is it?" "This ranch, this land, it's not just a business to me. It's a legacy I'm trying to build. Something that will outlast me, that will grow and sustain future generations." His eyes met hers, earnest and vulnerable. "I want children, Nora, a family. I understand if that's not what you want, or if you need time, but I needed to be honest about what I hope our future holds." Relief and warmth flooded through her. "Oh, Isaiah, I want that too. A family, children, a home filled with love and laughter." She touched his face gently. "I came west seeking security, but what I've found with you is so much more. It's purpose, partnership, the chance to build something meaningful together." The tension left his shoulders and he smiled down at her. "Then we're agreed, partners in all things." "Partners," she echoed, sealing the word with another kiss. They were married in September, when the first hints of autumn were touching the hills with gold and crimson. The ceremony was held at the ranch, under an arbor Isaiah and his men constructed near the creek. Reverend Harrison from the Deadwood Church officiated, and it seemed the entire community turned out to witness the union of the respected rancher and the beloved schoolteacher. Mrs. Finch cried unashamedly throughout the ceremony, later declaring it was about time Isaiah found himself a proper wife. The ranch hands were awkwardly formal in cleaned and pressed shirts, but their affection for their boss and his bride was evident in their enthusiastic celebration afterward. Nora wore a new dress of ivory silk, ordered especially from Denver, with Mrs. Finch's help. When Isaiah saw her walking toward him, escorted by Charlie, who had volunteered for the honor, The look of wonder and love on his face was worth every mile she had traveled to reach this place, this moment, this man. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love, honor, and cherish through whatever life might bring. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Isaiah's kiss was restrained but full of promise for the privacy that would come later. The cheer that went up from the assembled guests echoed across the valley, startling birds from the cottonwoods. The celebration continued well into the night, food and drink flowing freely, music and dancing under lantern light, congratulations and well wishes from friends and neighbors. As darkness fell, Isaiah found Nora standing apart for a moment, watching the festivities with a contented smile. "Happy, Mrs. Jackson?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. The new name sent a thrill through her. "Very happy, Mr. Jackson, and you, more than I can express." He turned her to face him. "Did you ever imagine when you stood on that platform in Deadwood that this would be your life 3 months later?" Nora shook her head. "Never, but I wouldn't change a moment of it." She leaned into him, drawing strength and joy from his solid presence. "It's strange to think that if Theodore had met me that day, none of this would have happened. Remind me to thank him if we ever cross paths," Isaiah said with a wry smile. "His loss was decidedly my gain." They rejoined the celebration, accepting congratulations and sharing their happiness with all who had come to celebrate with them. When the last guest had departed and the ranch was quiet once more, Isaiah led Nora to the house, their house now, their home together. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Nora continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named William, after Isaiah's father in the summer of their second year of marriage. Mrs. Finch, promoted to the position of honorary grandmother, was a godsend during those early days of parenthood. The ranch prospered under Isaiah's careful management. New land was acquired, the herd expanded, and the original house was added to as their family grew. A daughter, Elizabeth, arrived 2 years after William, followed by another son, James, 18 months later. Each child brought new dimensions to their love, new reasons to build their legacy. Life on the frontier was never easy. Harsh winters, summer droughts, outbreaks of disease in the herd, economic downturns all tested their resolve and resourcefulness. But through every challenge, Isaiah and Nora faced the future as they had promised together, partners in all things. 5 years into their marriage, a letter arrived from Boston, Nora's cousin Martha, who had first introduced her to Theodore Blackburn, writing to share news and inquire after Nora's welfare. With Isaiah looking over her shoulder, Nora penned a reply, describing her life, her family, the unexpected path that had led her to true happiness. "Should we thank her?" Isaiah asked as Nora sealed the envelope. "For introducing you to Blackburn. For setting in motion the chain of events that brought you to me." Nora considered the question. "Perhaps, though I think the real thanks goes to you for being at that station when I needed you, for offering me freedom when I felt most trapped." Isaiah drew her into his arms, his love for her as strong as the day they wed. "Best words I ever spoke, then you're free to come with me." "And the truest," Nora agreed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him, "for I have never felt more free than I do loving you." On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, they returned to the wildflower meadow where Isaiah had proposed. Their children raced ahead, laughing and calling to each other as they discovered butterflies and interesting rocks. Isaiah spread a blanket in the same spot as that long-ago day, and they sat together, watching their family, the tangible proof of their love. "Any regrets?" Isaiah asked, taking her hand, his thumb brushing over the wedding band that had not left her finger in a decade. Nora shook her head, leaning against his shoulder. Not one. You. Only that I didn't find you sooner, he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. But then maybe the timing was exactly as it should have been. You standing alone on that platform, me offering an alternative. Both of us choosing a different path than the one we'd planned. The better path, Nora amended, the one that led us home. As they watched their children play against the backdrop of the ranch that had flourished under their care, Nora Adams Jackson gave silent thanks for a storm, a missed meeting, and a cowboy who had offered freedom when she needed it most. Theodore Blackburn's absence that day hadn't been an ending, but a beginning, the first step toward the life and love she had found with Isaiah Jackson, a love that continued to deepen and strengthen with each passing day. In the wildflower meadow, surrounded by the family they had created together, they renewed their promise to each other not with formal vows, but with the simple certainty of hands clasped tight, of shared smiles, of hearts that had chosen each other and would continue to choose each other every day for all the days to come.